God says man should always pray and not faint. In other words, if you pray, you won't give up. It helps you to persevere. And God wants us to pray. In fact, he tells us to ask him. And he said, ask and it shall be given. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be open. But if you don't ask God, God can do nothing. God cannot intervene in our life until we open the door and ask him to intervene. But when we ask him, he's there for us to help us and answer our prayers. And I've seen that all through my career and all through my life, and still pray today because prayer is so powerful. In fact, prayer is one of the greatest powers on the planet. Well, as I learned to pray, then I talked about learning to obey. You know, learning obedience is so important, you know, because there's a protocol, there's a protocol in life. You know, children, their parents are over them, and, you know, God is over everyone. And the children, first of all, have to listen to their parents. They got to obey them. And when they obey them, your parents, when you obey them, it keeps you out of trouble. It's like a covering. It protects you. But if you disobey, you lose that covering. And so that's where the enemy can come and come in and put havoc on your life, you know, hurt you. So learning to pray is so important, and learning to obey is what keeps you and protects you. So those were the two keys in my life. And I started praying. I actually started praying real early in life, but I never forget one night, I was 7 years old, and I had some problems with my tonsils. So they were bothering me, they were hurting, and they were irritating. So I never forget one night I changed my prayer and I asked God to, you know, touch me and make me feel better. Well, the next morning I woke up and the irritation and pain was gone. And I never forgot that. I kind of put that in my spiritual bank account. And the next thing I prayed about something that was significant was when I was 10. At the age of 10, I had a bicycle, but it was a raggedy, beat up bicycle. It was probably the worst bike in the neighborhood. So I would run into my friends' bicycles to tear theirs up so theirs could be bad as mine. Well, they didn't like me for that. They said, stay away from Ken. He's going to tear up your bike. So I lost a lot of friends. So I didn't ask my parents for a bicycle because I didn't think they could afford it. I didn't think they would get it anyway. But you know what I started doing? I started praying by the bicycle. And that Christmas, I'll never forget, was the perfect red and white Swin bicycle. Well, man, when I saw that bicycle under that Christmas tree, my whole prayer life changed. I started praying about everything I wanted in life. And I'll never forget the next thing I started praying about was for God to help me be a good athlete. And I started praying, and I never forget, as I was, you know, trying out for the different teams in middle schools, as I mentioned, I was cut from the basketball team, sit the bench on the football team. In the 9th grade, the same thing happened. Well, in 8th grade, the same thing happened. I was cut from the basketball team, sit the bench on the football team. But I kept praying to God to help me be this good athlete. Well, interesting, over the summer, from the 8th grade to 9th grade, I grew about 5 inches. I went into the 9th grade, I was 6'1½". I weighed about 170 pounds. The coaches didn't even know me. They thought I was a transfer student. And that year in the 9th grade, I made the 9th grade basketball team, started at center. Made the 9th grade football team, started at defensive end. And from that point on, everything in my life began to take off. Well, the next thing I started praying about is that I wanted to be 6'6" tall, because I figured if I could be 6'6" tall, that would probably, help me in terms of being even better as a basketball player. And I saw guys who were, tall in my neighborhood, and I thought, man, if I could be that tall, and they were pretty tall, they were around 6'5", 6'6". Well, guess what? Then I asked God, I said, if you make me a superstar, and I said this prayer at 15 years old, I said, whatever you want me to do in life, I'll do it. And I said that I made that vow to God. Now, vow is something that you sort of like a contract. You tell God you'll do this if God does this for you. And so I'll never forget saying that vow one night. And when I finished high school, I was 6'6", weighed 210 pounds. I was all-state in football, all-state in basketball, high school All-American in both sports. I was one of the top basketball, football players in the nation. I got scholarships from all over the country. And, it was amazing. And my world was amazing. And in fact, I never forget, my sophomore year, I quit the football team because I really wanted to concentrate on basketball. Well, when I quit the football team in high school, my high school coach, Mr. Chadbourne, I never forget, came up to me and said, Ken, why did you quit the football team? I said, Coach, I want to concentrate on basketball. He said, Ken, you never know what might happen. You ought to play football. Well, I really didn't want to play, but he insisted, and I said, okay, I played anyway. And, I played all through high school and came out of high school, and I was all-state. Little did I know that 5 years later, I would be playing in the NFL. It was because of that coach, and it was because of me obeying that coach, that I had an NFL career of 8 years. And I say that to say this. There are people God put in your life that can see a little farther than you can see. They say this about young people. They say young people only see the surface of life. And when I say that, that means what's on top. For example, I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and we have a lot of trees here. And one of the problems is that when there's a strong storm or a strong wind or a bad, storm, many times those trees will fall on people's homes and people get hurt, or their homes get damaged, the cars get damaged, and even people get killed. Well, those trees on the outside look perfectly healthy, but the real essence of those trees are the roots. And the roots are beneath the surface, and you never see the roots. And if those roots are bad, the tree can look perfectly healthy, but if the roots are bad, that tree can fall at any time. And that's how it is in life. It's not what we see that's so important. It's what we don't see is more important. And that's why it's important to have people that can help you and listen to them and obey them, those that are in authority, because they can see a little further than you can see. When I left high school, I decided to play basketball because, as I mentioned earlier, my dream was to play pro basketball. And I went to Indiana University, and Indiana was known for basketball at that time. They had some great players. And I got there, and I was pretty good my sophomore and junior year. In fact, my junior year, I averaged 24 points a game. I was one of the top rebounders in the Big Ten Conference. I averaged 12.5 rebounds a game. I was the most valuable player on my team my junior year. In fact, I was one of the top players in the Big Ten. And from that point, my very next year, going into senior year, I was getting letters from pro basketball teams. In fact, pro basketball team scouts were coming to watch me practice and see, the possibility of me being drafted by their team. So everything was going good. But my senior year, the most important year of my life, I began to drift away from God. And I began to party a little more. I began to, mess around with alcohol and drugs a little bit. Not a whole lot, but it's just enough to throw your game. So what happened my senior year, instead of a dream coming true, became a nightmare. My average from 24 points a game went down to like 12 points a game. Rebounds from 12.5 rebounds a game down to 6 rebounds a game. In fact, I started playing so bad, the crowd started booing me. I had never been booed in my life. Well, it was devastating. It was humiliating. I was so depressed, I wanted to give up and go home. It was the worst time in my life. And I was at the point of just going back home and forget about it all. And the season ended that senior year, and I was glad it was over. And I thought, man, I won't get drafted. Just things were just, they went terrible. But about 3 weeks after the season was over, I get a phone call. And on the other end of the telephone call was a scout from the Dallas Cowboys. And they called me and they said, Ken, we're here at Indiana University. We like to speak to you about, football. I said, I'm a basketball player. He said, that's all right. We look at athletes, whether they play football, basketball, baseball, or track. So he said, would you come down and meet us? And, reluctantly, I walked down there that evening afternoon to the field house. I get there are 2 scouts. And the first thing they said, Ken, what we like to do is we like to time you in the 40-yard dash. Now, the 40-yard dash is the criteria for pro football players. That's the judgment stick, you might say. And if you run a fast 40-yard dash, they'll give you a look. In fact, you'll get their attention. Well, I'll never forget that afternoon. I get ready to run a 40-yard dash for the first time in my life. I had never ran a 40-yard dash. I really didn't know what it was. But I went to my locker, put on my shorts, basketball shorts and shoes, and I exercised, did some calisthenics, warmed up a little bit, and I got ready to run this 40-yard dash. Well, I never forget, I was walking toward the starting point with one of the scouts, and he had a briefcase in his hand. And we get to the starting point, he opens up the briefcase, goes inside of it, and he pulls out this gun. Well, I got a little nervous when I saw the gun because I thought maybe they're going to be shooting while I'm running, make me run faster. Else they're going to be doing something, taking target practice. But I said, I looked at the scout. He said, Ken, this is just a starting gun. This is how we do the 40-yard dash. We do it officially. And then there was another scout at the finish line, and he had a stopwatch. And the scout asked me, was I ready to run it? And I said, yes, I am. So that afternoon, I got down in my old high school football stance. And he held the gun up in the air, and he fired it, and I took off as fast as I could run. When I crossed the finish line, the other scout, he hit his timepiece, his stopwatch, looked at my speed and said, man, that's pretty good speed for a guy your size. He said, Ken, you ran a 40-yard dash in 4.8 tenths of a second. He said, Mr. Johnson, we'd like to give you an opportunity to try out for the Dallas Cowboys. Would you be interested? I didn't say anything. I was a little surprised and a little reluctant anyway. Well, next he said, Mr. Johnson, we have some bonus money. I said, say what? So we have some bonus money. So I started looking at the briefcase because I'm thinking, man, that's where that bonus money is. And all I need to do is say, yeah, I play football and I get some money. Well, I tried to be cool. I said, let me think about it. He said, no problem. We'll go back to Dallas and we'll be in touch. Well, I left, they left. And I figured, I said, I'd never hear from the Dallas Cowboys again. They'll probably forget about me. And I just left it like that. Well, the next week, surprisingly, I get a letter from the Dallas Cowboys. And I never forget opening up that letter. I can still see it today. It said, Ken, let us tell you about the NFL. They said, Ken, the biggest guy in pro football is 6'9", weighs 290. His name is Bubba Smith. He's a defensive end for the Baltimore Colts. They said, Ken, the smallest guy is 5'8", weighs 180. And he was a running back for Kansas City. Well, I started comparing myself to this guy, Bubba Smith. I was 6'6". I weighed about 230 my senior in college, had a big old afro. And I started thinking, I said, I'll grow my afro out about 2 more inches. I'll be 6'8". And I could get big as this guy, Bubba Smith. So I had a plan. I would try to get as big as this guy, Bubba Smith. Well, the next thing I do is I go to the weight room. And, basketball players at that time, we didn't lift weights. We thought weights would buck you up and make you tight. And you wouldn't be a good shooter with a basketball if you were tight. So we never touched weights. I would go into the weight room for the first time, and I see a football player for Indiana working out on the bench press. This guy's pressing this ball over his chest, and I was curious. So I walked over to him. I knew him. I said, how much weight is that you bench pressing? He said, 225 pounds. I said, man, that's a lot of weight. But I was curious. I said, let me try. And I get down that afternoon, the first time in my life, reach up and grab this bar with 225 pounds, bring it off the brackets down to my chest, and on the first try, bench press 225. I thought, man, I didn't know I could do that. And I asked the guy, I said, how often you come in here? He said, 3 times a week. I said, man, I'm gonna meet you in here. And for the next 3 months, every other day, I was in that weight room at Indiana working out on the bench press, curls, military press, whatever I could do with weights. Guess what? At the end of 3 months, I was bench pressing over 400 pounds. My arms got bigger, my chest got bigger, and my head got bigger when I bench pressed over 400 pounds. Nobody on Indiana's football team could do that. And I called the Dallas Cowboys up. I said, send me that contract. And they sent the contract. And that was the beginning of my 8-year NFL pro career. And what I discovered later on is that God takes our failures in life. And if we give them to him, he'll turn the failures into success. God takes our defeats in life. And if we give our defeats to God, he turns the defeats into victory. But not only that, God takes our broken dreams, our broken hearts, our broken world, and if we give it to God, God can give us a new beginning. And that's just how powerful God is. I had a new beginning playing pro football, went in and made the Cincinnati Bengals and played 8 years because God allowed him to intervene. So I want to share with you young people that God can intervene in your life. He can help you overcome any problem, any difficulty that you may run up against. And that's just a part of my testimony. Now, Jake, I don't know how much further you want me to go on, but, if they have some questions at this time or they want to, share a little stuff, I got some more parts of the testimony and we can go further as we take a little time if there are some questions or comments.
Yeah, so we don't have any questions yet, but anyone who's watching, you can ask your questions at any time, and we will answer those as soon as we can. But for now, Ken, why don't you give us a little bit more about your testimony and how you came to know the Lord?
Yeah, okay. Well, as I mentioned, I started playing pro football. My first couple years in the NFL, I was a backup. I had to play nose tackle, defensive tackle, and defensive end. And, when you're a backup, you got to be good in every position on defense. And my third year, I became a starter at defensive end. I gained about 30 pounds. I was 265 pounds, and I could run the 40 in 4.75. And so I was big, strong, and quick. Well, I became pretty good. By my fourth year, I became the starter, and I was one of the top defensive ends in the game. And as I began to rise in popularity and, my game began to get good, I began to drift away from God again. You know, I had accepted Christ when I was 10 years old. I got baptized and everything, and I knew God. But as I became successful in football, I started making a lot of money, started buying cars, clothes, diamond rings, everything I wanted. But, what I did was I left out God. And I discovered that whenever you leave God out of your life begin to fall. Doesn't matter who you are, because God is our source. He's the one that helps us. He's the one that give us what we need to perform and do well. And when you leave God out, God lets you go on your own. And that's what he did in my life. And I went on my own, forgot about God in a sense, and everything began to fall apart in my life. I got injured. I never forget, I messed my knee up in a game against the Miami Dolphins and messed it up again several times. And so I lost my starting job. And my attitude changed. I was tired of football and tired of just, the Cincinnati Bengals. And they set me on the bench and everything, and I wanted to be traded, but they wouldn't trade me. But what happened was my last year in pro football, I was in an accident where I should have been killed. And let me tell you what happened. I went back to Anderson, Indiana, and there I was visiting my parents and staying with them. And I had bought a van. It was a customized van. It was nice. It was clean on the inside. And one morning, it was on a Monday morning, I get up and I get in my van and I start driving. Well, as I'm driving that morning, I'm coming up a road where I'm approaching some railroad tracks. And I'll never forget, it was Locust Street. I passed the last building on my right, and that morning my van came up on the incline to the railroad tracks. And out of nowhere, all of a sudden, I hear a horn blow. So immediately I look out of my window that afternoon, and this bright light hits me in the face. Well, I look behind that bright light, and there's a train about 100 yards away, blowing its horn, coming full speed. It shocks me, surprised me. So immediately I hit my accelerator to rush over those railroad tracks. But that morning, my van goes dead. I couldn't believe it. I was so afraid I couldn't even move. I couldn't even think. All I could do was sit there and watch that train come in the door of my van. And I just knew my life was over. When it hit, bam, I went out and I gave up. The next thing I remember was two guys dragging me out of the side door. They immediately rushed me to the hospital. I go in the hospital, first thing they do is x-ray me. They found no broken bones. They examined me. They found no internal injuries. In less than an hour, I walk out of that hospital with only 7 stitches, a scratch. Go back and see my van. The train had drug it yards down the railroad track. Engine twisted, doors collapsed in, every window shattered. Only place untouched was the seat I was sitting in. And when I saw that, I knew purposely my life had been spared. But more important, my life changed. I surrendered my life to Christ. And from that point on, I began to share my testimony across this nation, parts of the world. And I'm still doing it today because I never forget, God kept me to that vow I said, God, if you help me be successful and make me a good athlete, whatever you want me to do in life, I will do it. And you know what? That's just what God did. So, young people, you can make this vow to God, and I guarantee you, He will intervene in your life and help you become the person you need to be.
That story always amazes me. I've heard it several times now, but it's so crazy. Uh, what model car was that? Because I think I want to buy one.
Oh, that was a Dodge van.
Oh, Dodge makes good vehicles.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, they had a problem with what was it, the carburetor, because their carburetors was stalling, man, and that's what happened. And I didn't know that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it might get you stuck on the train tracks, but at least you'll survive the crash. That should be the new slogan.
Jesus. Well, I tell you, I thank God. But the amazing thing, check this out. The night before it happened, I dreamed about it. And in that dream, you know, when the train hit me in the dream, I woke up and I was wondering why I had that dream. And the very next day, that the same day, I was in that accident. So it's just amazing.
That's crazy. That's amazing. So what advice would you give to any young athletes out there who are looking to go into, you know, the world of pro sports, and how would you advise them keep their eyes on Christ in such a physicality and self-based world?
Well, you know, you have to really establish a relationship with God. And that what that is communicating with God every day, you know, because He wants you to know Him and He wants to reveal Himself to you. But if you don't talk to Him, you don't pray, and you don't, interact with God, God just will let you do what you want to do. He won't intervene. But He loves us and He cares about us and He has a plan for our lives. So the key thing is to get around people that are, you know, God fearing and love the Lord. Get around people like that. See, who you hang with or who you are around, that becomes who you become. So if you hang around people that want to do the right thing, it helps you and keeps you out of trouble, because people can persuade you to make bad choices. But if you're around good people, they'll help you make right choices. So it's who you're hanging with, who you're around, who's your friends. Make sure, you know, your friends are real friends, and that's what you have to do.
So we're getting close to the end here. So I'd like to open up to you to, if you have any parting words, anything, any last words of wisdom you'd like to share with everyone before we close it out.
Yeah, we're in turbulent times. You know, we've been in a pandemic. We've seen all kind of things happening, you know, last year and even in this year. So it's really time to get close to God and get to know God. And because a lot of people are hurting and a lot of people are really fearful because they don't want to attract the coronavirus and, you know, all the things that are going on in this world today. It's so much chaos all over the world. And so people are losing their jobs. There's a lot of unemployment. Our economy is bad. All these things are working against us. We're having storms and all kind of bad weather too. So we really need to get back to God, get back to praying, get back to seeking God, because He's there. All we have to do is ask Him. And if you ask Him, He'll come and help you overcome whatever it is you're dealing with.
Thank you, Ken, for sharing your story with everyone tonight. I know it was a shorter live stream because of the technical difficulties that we had this morning or earlier, and the fact we had to use Zoom, and there's a limited time slot on Zoom. But thank you, everyone who came and listened, and everyone who's there now. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Have a wonderful night, Ken.
All right. God bless. Thank you.